Thank you very much. So I'm Kevin Delaney. I co-founded Quartz in 2012, so just about 3 years ago. We're the global business news site owned by Atlantic Media, which is the parent company of The Atlantic magazine, which many of you probably know. When we launched Quartz, our goal, and there was a small troupe of traditional media veterans who did this. I worked at the Wall Street Journal for years. Our goal was to serve business professionals around the world with smart content designed to be read on whatever device they had near at hand. Quartz is found at qz.com. If you've not seen it yet, I won't be offended if during the session you go there and you browse and look at what we're doing. Quartz today has about 16 million readers a month, about half of them in the US and about half outside of the US. We now have about 70 full-time journalists who are writing content for this business readership. And we have, within the Atlantic Media Company, we have a very viable and thriving business. So prior to the launch of Quartz, Atlantic Media Chairman David Bradley had said to me, I think what Quartz should aim to do in everything that you do is to exhibit boldly creative intelligence. Now, we took bold and creative as literally as possible and tried to decide most significant questions by measuring which path was the more bold and creative. We did have the advantage of starting from scratch. There was nothing. Quartz didn't exist before 2012. So I'm going to take the next few minutes to talk about where those decisions have taken us. What designing a digital news product with a critical approach to questioning legacy assumptions and a premium on creativity, what that's meant and how it's working today. So the founding thought experiment of Quartz was, what would The Economist magazine be if it was created now and not in 1843? We undertook this out of great reverence for The Economist and respect for its continued relevance in the world today. And on 3 levels, there are 3 sort of high-level points that we agreed on. The first is that we would be mobile first. That's where all of the growth in news readership is. The second is that we should be a really global news organization. Our reporters combined speak 25 different languages. We have reporters around the world. There's an opportunity to really report on the new global economy and write for a post-national readership. And the third thing is that we wanted to be journalistic. A journalistic approach is the way that you create quality content that business readers respect and actually want to read more of. So those are the 3 things. So now the bold and creative part. So the first thing that was relatively creative on our part, I think, is the name Quartz. We're not named the International Business Global Journal newspaper. Our name Quartz is pretty unconventional. There's a snarky article in Forbes, which is what you're looking at, which sort of expressed this. And kind of interestingly, I almost never get asked about the origin of our name at this point, with that out of the way. But the point was to convey with the name Quartz that we were not a traditional news organization. So among the other first unusual and bold decisions that we took were to forgo 2 of the bedrocks of traditional digital media. So one was standard advertising units, and the second thing was the homepage. So Quartz launched without either one of those things. So all the advertising on Quartz would be bespoke ads. You're looking at some of them now. They appear in the flow of our content. And the idea was that to create beautiful ads that traditional web page layout with the right rail on the page constrained, and the experience would be better for both readers and advertisers. We also carry native advertising and have worked closely with advertisers over the last few years to improve the quality and the engagement of those advertisements. And we've effectively given advertisers the full functionality of our website. So this is an example from GE, which is a 3D browsable globe that displays a lot of their content. This is very different. This is actually not possible in a standard IAB ad unit. We've also forsworn some easy money from pre-rolls, pop-ups, takeovers, all of the abuses of a consumer's time that have helped spur the rise of ad blocking software. Quartz's publisher, my colleague Jay Loff, wrote in a piece on Medium earlier this week, we don't get in your way. Our ads don't pop up, push content down, or make you wait 5 to 30 seconds to get to the story you actually wanted to read or the video you actually wanted to watch. We keep our code as light as possible to go easy on your browser. So that's our advertising approach, which has been a departure from the traditional approach. The thing I mentioned before was that we didn't actually have a homepage when we launched either. We knew that almost no one would come to QZ.com as a homepage, and that any focus on it would be a distraction. In the very beginning, when you have 0 readers, no one's going to type in QZ.com. What you see here is one of the charts from the New York Times Innovation Report last year that shows that even big brands are seeing their homepage traffic declining. This further emphasized to our staff that the focus was on the article page and the quality of the content and its ability to actually spread in the world. Here's an example of an interactive article that we published that has won some awards that we published late last year that works just as well on a phone as it does on a desktop, and it's actually pretty complicated data and code behind it. So we do now have a homepage. We've come back, but the idea was that we wanted to do something that wasn't just a list of links to stories that we'd published over the last 24 hours. We wanted to provide our readers with another type of service if they were going to bother to come to our homepage. If you go to QZ.com, you can see the first experiment in what that is, and it's basically a news briefing, but it's an experiment that we're continuing to evolve. Our daily brief email, our morning email newsletter, was fairly radical when we launched it because it allowed readers to actually get a summary of the news that had taken place while they were sleeping, as if a trusted advisor or friend had written it for them. The convention when we launched Quartz was that email newsletters were just lists of headlines that were trying to push you off to the publisher's website where they had sold advertising. It could count you as a unique and a page view and an ad impression. So we have 5 journalists. This actually takes some resources. We have 5 journalists who touch the email newsletter that if you're based in Canada or the US, the one that you can receive at 6 a.m. in the morning. This has been overnight updated by a number of journalists. This is a commitment of journalistic resources that doesn't actually result in traffic back to our website. But the result is that today we have about 161,000 subscribers to this. About half of them are executives. And the open rate for this newsletter, that's the percentage of emails that we send that are actually opened by a human being, is about 40%, which is a multiple of the industry standard. And I would argue that's because it's meant to be, we focused on the user in doing so. I want to talk about video for a second. We've recently gotten into video, and rather than take the traditional approach, which is to run pre-roll against your video and set pretty steep inventory targets, because ad sales forces are able to sell pretty high CPM pre-roll inventory at volume. What we did is we hired 3 polymaths, so journalists who can shoot, edit, and produce videos, and gave them 6 months and told them, you should be as creative as possible. Treat this like a laboratory. See what types of video people are interested in, and publish directly onto Facebook and to YouTube. So we're now about 5 months into this experiment. We have not monetized our video at all, but these 3 people have produced videos that have attracted almost 40 million views on these different platforms. And we're moving this in the coming days into starting to monetize some of this video. I had worked in video. I knew that it was actually very easy to produce mediocre video content. It also was surprisingly easy to lose money on it. Our approach, not monetizing video for 6 months, publishing directly on these platforms, is, I would argue, the bolder and more creative and unconventional approach to getting into video. It's one that we've seen incredible results from. Our approach to content more broadly has been unconventional in a number of ways. So one way that we talk about the content that we produce is what we call the Quartz curve. And what this is it shows on the y-axis the likelihood of success of a given piece of content. And on the x-axis, it could be a variety of different things. In what you're looking at now, you can see the word count of articles. Now, when you look at what people read online, if you look at the data about what people read, their habits fall broadly onto the left and the right sides of this curve. People read short, focused things, maybe with a visual element like a chart that they can then digest perhaps on their phone and then go on and share with their friends if they actually think it is of value. They also actually read long content. So if there's a payoff for the reader in terms of the narrative, in terms of the analysis, in terms of the reporting, readers will read feature articles that are thousands of words long. Quartz publishes at the extremes of this curve. So we publish probably half or more of our articles are under 500 words. They often have a chart accompanying them. But we publish at least daily, we publish an article that is thousands of words long, where we believe there's a payoff for the reader for spending the time on it. And the readership of those articles actually confirms that that strategy is successful. I might note as a side note that the standard unit of production of a traditional media organization falls somewhere between the sides of the curve. And that's the challenge of news organizations. And it's something that we, working with journalists who have worked at traditional news organizations, have had to confront and deal with directly. Here are two examples of pieces that fall on different sides of the curve that Quartz has written. On the right side, you have a piece that was about 3,000, 4,000 words long, which made the economic case for paternity leave and was accompanied by about 25 charts. It was a very dense economic argument that ultimately gender equality in the workplace requires paternity leave so that men experience the same sort of pauses in their careers that women do, and that's one of the surest paths to bring equality more broadly. On the left, you have a tweet from one of my colleagues, Matt Phillips, which has Apple's share price. That's at the extreme left of the curve because there's just a handful of words there. But this is one of the keys to reader engagement. So another unconventional approach to content at Quartz has been our use of charts. What you're seeing here are data from a survey of global business executives that we do annually. And you're seeing one of the questions. And the top answer to this question, which feature and formats draw you into a piece of content, is the answer is charts. So what Quartz did is we built our own charting tool. There are plenty of charting tools, but they're actually kind of hard to use. They're complicated. In most traditional news organizations, the people who make the interactive graphics or the chart are a service bureau that sit alongside the journalists, but are actually separate from the journalists who are writing the articles. So what we did is at the very beginning of Quartz 3 years ago, we ourselves developed a tool called Chart Builder. And what this is a really simple tool to allow all of our journalists to create their own charts. So what you're seeing now are some examples of the charts that we made last year. Quartz journalists, a relatively small number of people, probably about 30 writers on average through the course of last year, produced almost 4,000 charts last year. Chart Builder is open sourced. This might be unconventional also. We've made it available to the community, and it's actually used by news organizations around the world for their own charts. We do some bespoke charts. This was not made with Chart Builder. And the point is that charts properly made are very efficient at conveying information and actually can be really interesting, particularly for business readership. This chart you're seeing might be hard to read, but it's a kind of interesting data set correlating girls' names in the US and Disney heroines' appearances in Disney films. We've created a platform emboldened by the success of these charts. We've created a platform which is called Atlas. You can visit it at atlas.qz.com. And the idea is that it gives these charts a home on the internet. We make available the underlying data to our charts. We give embed codes for people to use them in their own content. We allow you to download the graphics. Our plan is to open this platform to allow anybody to create charts using Atlas, and hope that this becomes the new home for charts and data on the internet as we're able to open it to other people. But you can go there today and look at the charts that are created by Quartz's journalists. The last thing that I want to talk about in terms of our unconventional approach to content is that one of the focuses of Quartz is that we're trying to produce content that's centered around what we call things. It's a sort of vague word. It's hard to define it precisely, but it's the sort of thing that you know when you see it. So things are the sort of stuff that when you're talking to people, you say, hey, look at this thing. Isn't this thing interesting? That is a thing. So here's an example of a thing that Quartz published. The Steve Jobs email that outlined Apple's strategy a year before his death. It's a thing. You might say to a friend, did you see that email, that Steve Jobs email that was released as part of a court case that outlines Apple's strategy going forward? That's a thing. That's different than the traditional approach to writing an article. And you can imagine the headline as being much more inscrutable and unspecific, actually. Things can be surprising facts, charts, photos, can be a long feature, exclusive bit of news, argument, a good headline, a quip. But they're always one thing. They're very focused. It's not a sort of broad, sprawling idea. It's a focused thing. Here's the economic case for paternity leave. This is a recent example where a Quora engineer, an engineer went on Quora to ask advice on which job offer he should take. And the CEO of one of the companies that made him an offer went on Quora and actually rescinded the job offer because he felt like the engineer didn't properly understand why he should work at the company. We wrote an article about it. A lot of people the day that we wrote this article, we know from the sharing patterns around this, we're effectively saying to other people, hey, did you see this thing? Did you see the stupid guy who got his job offer revoked because he went on Quora and the CEO of the company showed up and revoked his offer? Here are other examples of things. And you can read the headlines and probably see why they are things. So the core focus of Quartz, bringing this all back around, is we want to create smart content and advertising for business readers to experience and to share on any device. That's what we do. This is our staff based in New York. Today, at this point, we have staff around the world. We have about 7 journalists in India, a handful in Africa, a bunch of people in Asia and in Europe. Our post-national approach to staffing Quartz is designed to mirror the sort of reader who we're looking to attract. These are the people who are executing on that original charge, which was to be bold and creative. It's an approach I'd recommend to all of you in any of the initiatives that you're undertaking. It's been working for us very well so far. So thank you.
Kevin, thank you. I found myself emailing myself things you said in that presentation to remember later. The charts application, superb. I think that should really take off. Look, still a little bit tight for time, but we're okay, I think, for a question. If there is one from the audience, please make yourself known. Right over there. Is it making it?
Yeah. Here we go. Hi, I'm Jackie Locke from St. Joseph Media. You showed some pretty slick examples of bespoke advertising that would require a really high level of knowledge of the content. What does your sales team look like?
So Quartz has its own dedicated sales team, which we have from the beginning. And it's staffed both by veteran salespeople. Our publisher, Jay Loft, was the publisher of The Atlantic before and of Wired magazine before that. But it also includes a number of creative people, so people with backgrounds in journalism, content creation. Our sales team includes a handful of developers and designers as well. And so the approach to create the ads, as you rightly recognize, is a lot of involvement on the part of our marketing and sales staff with the advertisers. The GE example that I showed you is actually like relatively cutting edge development for the interactivity that was involved. Behind it, there's a pretty complicated database that pulls in geocoded content that GE has created in different geographies around the world. This requires a very deep collaboration and developers, designers, creative people on staff within Quartz to actually work with the advertisers to get that.
Okay, and there was just one more. If it's a fairly quick one, we'll take that.
Hi, is Quartz profitable?
That's a quick one. Yeah, that is a quick one.
We're a private company. We don't disclose our financials, so I can't answer the question. What I can say is that our business is doing really well, and we have a very solid business here. The core mission of a lot of us with Quartz, people who had worked at the Wall Street Journal and The Economist and these other places, was to create something that helped ensure that quality content was thriving in our digital era. The verb thriving is really important because that implies that you do have a profitable business, that you have something that is sustaining over time. We believe that Quartz is, I don't know what tends to use here. Quartz will be a profitable business, and the advertising has been incredibly promising. We've had about 150 advertisers, blue chip advertisers at this point, with a 90% renewal rate for advertisers. We're charging pretty high prices for these bespoke ads. Advertisers are coming back. We have an events business, which is another revenue stream this year. We're doing events on 4 continents. We did one in New Delhi yesterday, Nairobi last month. And so this is a really solid business. And I'm sorry, I can't answer your question directly.
And that is all we've got time for. Please can I ask you to thank Kevin Delaney. Thank you.
Thank you.